Hey guys, it's Jack here today, and today we're going to be starting a new series called 10 Bands. Basically, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking of 10 bands that I feel either peaked at a certain era or peaked early, peaked later in their career. So basically, today I'm going to do bands that never topped their first two albums. Next time, it could be bands that peaked at their third album or bands that peaked later in their career, stuff like that. So we're gonna do bands that never topped their first two albums, in my opinion, of course. This is all subjective. You may feel differently about them, which is fine. And just because I feel like their first two albums are the best doesn't mean I dislike the stuff that came after. So, first band is a non-metal band. There aren't really many on here, but this is the only one that's not like metal at all. The band is Mogwai. So I am fairly big Mogwai fan, especially the first couple of releases, which is what I want to talk about today. Mogwai Young Team is a brilliant album, and then the second album, Come On Die Young, they're both brilliant albums, and a couple of my favourite non-metal albums, because you could still consider it a rock album. It's like kind of, I think they call it post-rock, which is like quite sort of atmospheric, sort of soothing, quite light, quite, I don't know. It's not really my general type of music, but I do really like Mogwai. And Mogwai Young Team is my favourite, but the follow-up, Come On Die Young, is really good. I do enjoy a fair bit of their discography, but the first two to me remain Mogwai at their best. My favourite Mogwai song is Tracy. I really like that one. As I say, Mogwai Young Team is my favourite release of theirs. So there we go. Check out Mogwai if you haven't. Next is System of a Down. This is an obvious pick. I think quite a lot of fans would probably agree that their first two albums are the best. I have their debut, and I've owned countless copies of Toxicity over the years because I've played that album quite a lot. My favourite song is their obvious hit Chop Suey, and my favourite album is Toxicity. I think it's fair to say that the three singles from System of a Down's album Toxicity have become bigger with time. To be fair, they were always huge hits, but it feels like now they've just become even bigger. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, over the years, they've just been played more, and I think everybody at this point knows at least those three songs. A lot of people into like rock and metal at least know those three songs, especially Chop Suey. You know, that song's even made a name for itself outside the metal scene. Do you know what I mean? With memes and use in media, etc. But yep, Chop Suey to me is my favourite System of a Down song. I love this whole album, Toxicity. And the debut is really good as well. The debut and Toxicity remain my favourites. Debut's great. I do still enjoy all their albums after. With still this album being a very, very good album as well, the third album. But I don't think any of them after quite reach the heights of the first two, Self-Titled and Toxicity. Next up is a band that a lot of people like to hate, but I do enjoy the first half of their career, especially these first two records. Disturbed. So the first two albums. So you have The Sickness and Believe. I like Believe more, and my favourite song is Prayer. For me, the first two albums from Disturbed are really good. And then there's just a few songs here and there that I like. But I only really like the first two to listen to in full. 10,000 Fists has a couple of good songs, you know, the obvious tracks like Stricken and the title track. But I'm not a huge fan of that record. I know a lot of people are. And for me, after Believe, I'm just kind of hit and miss with Disturbed. Again, Indestructible has some good songs. Same with Asylum. Even Immortalized has a couple of good songs. And then after that, there's just complete garbage. Well, you know, whatever. But yeah, for me, they're more of a singles band. You know, I enjoy all the hits after Believe. Do you know what I mean? Up to Immortalized, of course. After that, you can forget it. But yeah, for me, they're more of a greatest hits kind of band. I like the first two albums. I could play those two albums, and that's about it for me. The Sickness, I really recommend, and Believe. My favourite song is Prayer. That's my favourite Disturbed song. So next, moving on to Obituary, a band I've seen live, and their first two records, Slowly We Rot and Cause of Death. They never topped them. They never topped them. They're brutal, they're raw, they're to the point. My favourite song is Chopped in Half. My favourite album is Cause of Death. I own it on CD, and it's my favourite Obituary album. I do enjoy all their stuff. I'm not saying that they're bad after. I might Disturbed. No, Disturbed ain't that bad. But yeah, Cause of Death is really good. Oh, it's my favourite. Slowly We Rot's really good as well. My favourite song is Chopped in Half. Brilliant song. Next up is another band that a couple of people hate, but I think they're more respected than Disturbed. This is Linkin Park. First two albums, Hybrid Theory, Meteora, they're like hard rock, borderline alternative metal. It is. It's like new metal, alternative metal, hard rock, whatever. You know what I mean? Some people say, "Oh, they're not metal," and they're not really. They're more hard rock, alternative metal, and even then on certain songs. You know what I mean? They're more of a rock band, to be fair. Let's face it. And my favourite of the two is Hybrid Theory. Meteor is a really good album as well, the second album, but I don't think they ever quite topped Hybrid Theory. Place for My Head is my favourite song from the band. And so let's talk about, is their stuff any good after? Up to a point, yes. Minutes to Midnight is a fairly solid release. That's still a good album. I wouldn't say it's as great as the first two. And then after that, it's kind of hit and miss, really. The first three are all good, with the first two being absolutely excellent. And then, yeah, they kind of slowly went into more kind of electronic territory. But, you know, all kind of good stuff. A couple of good singles here and there, but they went in a more pop direction. So for me, I always stand by the first two albums from Linkin Park, with a couple of songs on Minutes to Midnight in the playlist too. So there we go. Hybrid Theory is my favourite. Next up is an amazing band. Just because the first two are my favourites doesn't mean the rest of their stuff's bad, because these guys are brilliant. Amorphous. The first two albums are my favourites. The Carolyn Isthmus. There we go. I had a bit fucking pronunciation wrong. The Carolyn Isthmus and Towers of the Thousand Lakes, which is my favourite one, the second album. My favourite song is Black Winter Day, the song that a lot of people know them for. Yeah, I do enjoy a lot of their stuff after, with Elegy being absolutely brilliant. But I just think the first two are the best. I still love Amorphous to this day. I haven't followed every single album they've done, but I love their 90s albums particularly. Elegy is another really good one as well. And yeah, there we go. Amorphous. Tales from the Thousand Lakes, their second album is my favourite. Next up is one of the biggest metal bands in the world, Slipknot. I think their first two albums are the best. I do still enjoy... For me, I enjoy the 2000s period of Slipknot. I like the first four albums, especially the first two, but I do like all the first four albums. And then for me, I don't like Grey Chapter as much as most people do. I still enjoy it. I think it's a really good album. But I think the first four will always be the best for me, with Iowa being my favourite song being Left Behind. So the first two albums you have, the debut, Slipknot self-titled, and then Iowa, and Left Behind's my favourite song. Then after that you have Subliminal Verses, which is a really good record. But there are a few songs, like the more ballady ones, that I'm not feeling that much. Whereas the first two you could just play all the way through. But there are some really good tracks on Subliminal Verses, and it is overall a really good album. And then obviously All Hope Is Gone is a solid one. I feel like that one's more consistent than Subliminal Verses. And then after that, as I say, I enjoy Grey Chapter, just not quite as much. We Are Not Your Kind is okay. I like it, but it's kind of doesn't leave the same with an impact. And then the new one, I wasn't feeling that too much. But there we go. For me, first two Slipknot albums are the best ones. Next up is a band that I don't think have made that many bad albums, Korn. First two albums for me are still their best. I do enjoy the first bunch of their career, though, you know, the first 90s leap. First two albums, so you obviously had the debut Korn self-titled album and then Life is Peachy, which are definitely my two favourite Korn albums. But there are other really good ones as well, especially Follow the Leader and Issues. Korn's an interesting band for me because I like Untouchables, but like that was when they were starting to go like a bit more mainstream, and I still like that album. And then Take a Look in the Mirror, and again I still like that album. It was a heat towards more experimental like styles, and it was just again it was more, I don't know, it weren't as unpolished as those first bunch, you know what I mean? Even Follow the Leader and Issues, do you know what I mean? I still enjoy the first six, as I say. I do enjoy Untouchables and Take a Look in the Mirror, but I don't know, they didn't quite have the same impact as the first four. Yeah, those first two especially for me. Blind is my favourite song. My favourite is the debut, the first album. That is absolutely my favourite Korn album. I'm going to play every single song. I can with Life is Peachy as well, but I think the debut is just a bit better. Yeah, as I say, and I enjoy a couple of the like more recent Korn albums, like the Nothing had a fairly solid track listing on it, and so did Requiem. But then I feel like a lot of the stuff in between is like from Korn's 2006 Untitled album, which is really not a good album. And then again, like Korn Freedom, Remember Who You Are, I don't like that album very much. I don't like the dubstep one. I don't really like Paradigm Shift that much. Serenity of Suffering has some good cuts, but it's not that good of an album. And then the Nothing and Requiem is Korn back to their best, I think. They'll never top the first, bunch of records, but at least the last few have been pretty good. Yeah, Blind is my favourite Korn song of all time. I just love it. And the Korn self-titled album is my favourite Korn release. Next is Annihilator. This band just never, ever topped those first two. Like, I've tried to get into the more recent stuff, and there is a few songs, like the song, so let me just say about what the first two albums are first, shall I? Alice in Hell and Never Neverland, with the first album, Alice in Hell, being my favourite, but I really love Never Neverland as well. My favourite song is easily their biggest hit, Alice in Hell. The song that got a music video, the first song that got a music video for them, and it's a brilliant song. It is a fucking brilliant song. It really is, still to this day. Alice in Hell, my favourite. The second album, Never Neverland, is really good. And then, as I say, I have a tricky time with Annihilator. Like, the only song I really find myself loving after is Set the World on Fire from the third album, the title track. I did enjoy a couple of songs on Ballistic Sadistic, but as for albums, I only really love the first two. I only really like the first two, in fact, you know what I mean? There we go. Annihilator, really solid on their first two albums, and then just not my thing after that. Do you know what I mean? They are still a great band. And then next up, we have Him. This is another band that people used to hate. Like, back when this band were, like, popular, this band were, like, people, because obviously metal magazines were, like, constantly, featuring them, and people were like, oh, Him isn't metal. They're not really metal. No, they're gothic rock with a hint of, like, gothic metal. But yeah, they're not really metal. But I don't know. They were so big at the time that metal magazines were just including them. But I don't know. People are going to be like that. Him is a really good band. I really enjoy Him. Don't enjoy every single Him song, but I do especially like the first two albums. And my favourite of the first two is Greatest Love Songs, the debut. And then obviously came Razorblade Romance, which was their big breakout moment. My favourite song is their Wicked Game cover. These first two albums are really good, really promising start to their career. I do enjoy the majority of Him stuff, but I think they never topped their first two. this was when they were really popular in Scandinavia, but were only just breaking big like everywhere. Do you know what I mean? That second album did start to break them through, and then by like what was it called? Love Metal. They were big everywhere. Do you know what I mean? Him in like 2003 to 2007 was just everywhere. And yeah, they got a fair bit of popularity with Razor Blade Runners. You know what I mean? I think that's where all the him hype started. And a lot of people started to hate them. Do you know what I mean? Because they were like a more poppy goth metal band. I don't know. I don't know why people hate him, but I like him. And the first two albums are especially really good. So there we go. There's 10 bands that never topped their first two albums, in my opinion. And all these bands do have a little bit of stuff after these albums, and some of them I like their whole careers, but I just think their first two albums are the best. Should I carry on this series? Are you enjoying it? To all my viewers, and which band do you feel never quite topped their first two albums? Thank you for watching. Until next time.